in Argentina, Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner are sworn in as president and vice president. Representatives from Venezuela and the Caribbean speak at the COP-25 Climate Change Summit. And protests are held outside the International Court of Justice as hearings start in the genocide case against Myanmar. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. We start in Argentina, where Alberto Fernandez has been sworn in as the new president.
I, Alberto Ángel Fernández, swear by God, by my country, and on the Holy Gospel to fulfill with loyalty and patriotism the role of President of the nation, and to obey and have obeyed the Constitution of Argentina. If I fail, may God and my country judge me.
Fernandez took the oath before a packed Congress in Buenos Aires. He was accompanied by the new vice president and former president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. The two have promised a new era in Argentina with the problems of mounting hunger, unemployment, and falling production at the top of the agenda, after 4 years of neoliberal policies under President Mauricio Macri.
I, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, swear by God, by my country, and on the Holy Gospel to fulfill with loyalty and patriotism the role of Vice President of the nation, and to obey and have obeyed faithfully the Constitution of Argentina. If I fail, may God, my country, and the people judge me. Thank you.
After being sworn in, Alberto Fernandez received the presidential sash from the outgoing president and proceeded to sign the Act of Succession. In his inaugural address, Argentina's new leader reminded people that the 10th of December is the anniversary of the end of a cruel dictatorship 37 years ago. He promised to put social justice at the center of a new social contract in Argentina.
On the basis of the hope that millions of Argentinians expressed at the ballot box on the 27th of October, I come to urge the unity of all Argentina in order to build a new contract among citizens. A social contract that expresses fraternity and solidarity. Fraternity because it is time to embrace differences. Solidarity because in this social emergency, it is time to begin with those who are last in order eventually to reach everyone. This is the spirit of the era that we are now beginning, with sober words and audacious actions. I call on everyone without distinction to put Argentina on its feet so it can begin to walk step by step with dignity on the path towards development with social justice. Today it is more necessary than ever to set Argentina back on its feet so that it can move forward. And that means above all restoring a series of balances in our society and economy which today do not exist. It is time to overcome lethargy, to be aware of the deep wounds we now suffer and which, in order to be cured, need time, tranquility and above all, humanity.
Bolivia's deposed president Evo Morales has welcomed the arrival of Alberto Fernandez to the presidency of Argentina. In a tweet, Morales said, "Today hope has returned to our sister republic of Argentina with Alberto and Cristina. We congratulate these valiant people who are raising the flag of integration in our Latin America." Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa was one of the Latin American leaders present for the swearing-in of Alberto Fernandez. He got the same welcome from the new president of Argentina as other serving leaders. And while on an official visit in Argentina, Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel attended a solidarity act at the University of Buenos Aires. Díaz-Canel condemned the coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia and the persecution of both former Brazilian President Lula da Silva and Cristina Fernández de Kirchner in Argentina. During his visit, he also held a working breakfast with business owners with the objective of boosting bilateral trade. At the solidarity event, he praised the Argentine left for ushering in the new era of progressive change.
Made imperialist and oligarchy now. There's no force in the world which can separate our peoples. There's no force in this world that can separate Cuba and Argentina. You confirm the triumph of the popular movements and campesinos, unions, political forces, students and women's organizations, as well as groups of intellectuals.
Well, Argentinians counted down the seconds until the government of former President Mauricio Macri officially ended at midnight on Monday. There were ecstatic scenes in Buenos Aires Plaza de Mayo, with revelers celebrating the end of the president's four-year term. At the plaza, several residents said Macri's neoliberal policies contributed to a massive rise in debt, unemployment, and hunger in Argentina. According to the Social Debt Observatory, the country's poverty rate surpassed 40%, meaning at least 16 million Argentinians are living without basic necessities. Shifting gears now, a military plane carrying 38 passengers has gone missing in Chile. The Air Force said the Hercules aircraft was headed to the Antarctic Air Base on Monday afternoon when it lost communication. A state of alert was initiated and a search and rescue team has been sent to the area. El Salvador is commemorating the 38th anniversary of the El Mozote massacre, when in 1981, at least 1,000 people were murdered by military forces.
Jose Vigil is a relative to 54 of the hundreds of victims who were killed by the Atlacatl Battalion during El Salvador's civil war.
My uncles died here in El Mozote. In El Jocote plantation, my sister and her children were killed. And in Los Toriles, I lost my brother, along with his wife and their 6 children.
People sing songs to honor the victims. They remember the cruelty of the army during the Civil War.
I am always willing to fight for justice. I want those who ordered this massacre to answer for their crimes.
Since 2016, the trial of 18 former members of the military high command has restarted. They all deny having been involved in the massacre, but 2 witnesses that were part of the Atlacatl Battalion confirmed the atrocities committed.
What we saw was confirmed by those 2 soldiers, but the accused former commanders say they are lies.
The trial against those former commanders continues to move forward, although archives detailing the genocidal operations carried out by the army have not yet been made public.
We are awaiting the judge's ruling on how and when we can access these archives. This will be a huge step because we would know the extent of judges who were involved.
During this year's anniversary, the bones of 29 victims discovered in 2016 were supposed to be buried, but due to alleged negligence by the legal medicine team, the burial could not be carried out.
When we come back, welcome back. Venezuela was among the many nations participating in the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, COP-25. The delegation was headed by Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza.
Professor Karl Marx had already warned of it. Back in 1992, the commander-president, Fidel Castro, said that there was an endangered species, and that species was the human one. We can say 27 years later that the human species is still in danger of extinction. Allow me also to recall the words that Commander Hugo Chavez took from the streets of Denmark in the demonstrations against the Conference on Climate Change 10 years ago. And although they tried to not give the floor to him or the worthy President Evo Morales of Bolivia, Hugo Chavez said, "Let's not change the climate, let's change the system, and consequently begin to save the planet." For Venezuela, it is fundamental that the international community renew its commitment to multilateralism and international law in all areas, especially in the climate area. But we shouldn't talk about a climate crisis, but rather of an emergency. We should call it by its name, which is almost a catastrophe, and we need to stop it immediately.
Also speaking at the COP-25 conference, Barbados reflected on the catastrophic damage caused by hurricanes on Caribbean countries over the years, most recently in the Bahamas. With this in mind, the Barbados representative called for immediate action, noting that the island will implement its own policies to tackle climate change.
The government intends to enhance the resilience of low and middle-income households to extreme weather events. In concert with these adaptation measures, and despite being only a minimal contribution to the global greenhouse gas emissions, the government of Barbados remains committed to doing its fair share to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, as articulated in the Barbados National Energy Policy, we will seek to transform Barbados from a petroleum-based economy to a first green 100% renewable energy and carbon-neutral island state by the year 2030.
Antigua and Barbuda Foreign Affairs Minister E.P. Chet Green has denounced the embargo imposed on Cuba by the United States as he observed CARICOM Cuba Day. Monday marked 47 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between CARICOM member states and the Republic of Cuba. In a small ceremony held on Friday, Green said, "We CARICOM countries continue to reiterate our call for an end to the economic, commercial and financial blockade imposed by the U.S. government against Cuba. We condemn the current U.S. administration's decision to tighten sanctions against our Caribbean sister island of Cuba."
Minister, the Honorable E.P. Chet.
Two former Algerian prime ministers have been convicted for corruption. Ahmed Waya was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay a fine of $16,000. Mand Abdel Malik Zalal was sentenced to 12 years in prison and also ordered to pay $8,000 in fines. They were accused of abusing their authority in a car manufacturing embezzlement scandal. This is one of the most high-profile corruption convictions since the protest movement began in February in Algeria. Shifting gears now, Gambia has called on Myanmar to stop genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority. Gambia has filed a case at the International Criminal Court against Myanmar for violating the Genocide Convention by depriving the Rohingya people of their rights. Myanmar is accused of committing extrajudicial killings and destruction of shelter for the Muslim minority people, among other offenses. Almost 1 million Rohingya people fled to neighboring Bangladesh after a bloody crackdown in 2017 by the Myanmar military.
We seek to protect not only the rights of the Rohingya, but our own rights as a state party to the Genocide Convention by holding Myanmar to its erga omnes parties obligations not to commit genocide, not to incite genocide, and to prevent and punish genocide.
The English-speaking community in Cameroon is said to be granted special status of their region. The Cameroonian National Assembly is debating a bill aimed at granting special status to the Anglophone region. English-speaking Cameroonians have faced ethnic conflicts and they have pinned their hopes on the bill to bring about peace in the region. The bill debate came after a national dialogue was held to try and bring solutions to the Anglophone crisis.
I think that for a special status, the government must react very quickly. The government must make this a priority. But the way it does things, I don't think it's their priority. Their priority is the elections they announced for February 9.
Staying in Africa, mining companies have reduced or shut down operations in South Africa after the country's only power supplier, Eskom, announced it would roll out power cuts. It said the national power grid has no capacity to keep the lights on. Our correspondent Matuba Malachi has more on the electricity crisis.
It looks like South Africa's economy is headed for a recession, and that's according to economists and experts who are observing the developments in the country. And the biggest development now is the power cuts that have been happening more frequently and for much longer. South Africa's only power utility, Eskom, which is also a state-owned company, says it can't keep the lights on as usual because now it's been introducing what it calls stages in load shedding. Load shedding is something that happens, the power cuts that happen rotationally around the country. And so now we've had stage 2 and stage 4 of load shedding so far by Eskom. But now on Monday we've seen something that we've never seen before, which was stage 6 load shedding, which is rotational power cuts, much longer and more frequent. So it means South Africans will have less electricity, at least 50% of electricity in 24 hours. That's what stage 6 load shedding means according to Eskom. And now South African government has reacted to this development with a mere apology. The South African government at this point can't offer more than an apology. It has apologized to South Africans for the major inconvenience that has come with this load shedding that's been introduced by the power utility. And the power utility is defending its stance, saying this is the only way it can keep the power grid on if it has rotational power cuts around the country. If not, it will have a total shutdown of the power grid, which is something that the economy does not need at this point. But already the economy is being affected negatively by these power cuts by Eskom, because Eskom is one of the biggest economic drivers. But now the economy is going to be hurt by this power cuts that we see now. And that's not helping us much as South Africa, because Moody's ratings agency is keeping an eye on South Africa and is supposed to make a pronouncement in February to decide where it stands actually with the country. But economists and experts, as I've told you, say we are heading for a recession if Eskom does not change the way it's doing things so far. And the change at Eskom is not something we're going to see anytime soon, because as I said, South Africa, the only thing that the South African government could offer was an apology and hope for the best. And it's not helping that this weather we've had for almost a week now has been persistent and also causing major destruction. And rescue operations by emergency services is a bit slower than usual when we have electricity. But for now, South Africa is going to end the year at a very, very difficult note. And we can only live in hope that President Cyril Ramaphosa can steer this ship before it hits the proverbial iceberg, as many predict. It's back to you, studio.
That was our correspondent Matuba Malachi speaking with us from South Africa. Staying in the country, the Communist Party has entered day 2 of its 4th Special National Congress. The Congress is addressing issues of economy, elections, the tripartite alliance, building socialism and international solidarity. Presentations were given by Venezuelan and Cuban guests, and the delegates showed solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. The second Deputy General of the Communist Party, Che Matlako, spoke about some of the issues which the Congress is taking on.
These are not just rights that are enshrined in constitutions, but have many an impact on the material conditions of people. The Special National Congress of the party is important in this conjuncture because it will be looking at evaluating what we've been doing in the last 2.5 years or so. But also in the crisis of neoliberalism, as we see the advance of fascism elsewhere in the world. And these are some of the challenges that we confront, and we think it's important to connect what the party is doing in its Special National Congress and all of the struggling peoples across the world, including the Palestinians, including Western Sahara and elsewhere.
And the first Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party had this to say on a session that coincided with International Human Rights Day.
International Human Rights Day, we take this opportunity to wish the people all over the world the best, and also to call on countries that are oppressing peoples in Palestine, in the Basque Country, in Nicaragua, in the Western Sahara, in Swaziland, the imperialist forces to stop doing this and respect people's rights.
Coming up, is Turkey planning to send troops to Libya? Don't move and you'll find it. Welcome back. In some tragic news, a gunman killed 6 patients at a hospital in the eastern Czech city of Ostrava on Tuesday. The attacker gunned down the patients at the trauma ward of the faculty hospital. He turned the gun on himself while seated in a vehicle as police were about to capture him. Turkey has announced it is now ready to send troops to Libya to maintain peace if requested by the internationally recognized government in Tripoli. The Turkish president made the announcement following an announcement signed with Libya's government of national accord led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj last month. Under the deal, Turkey and Libya are set to carry out joint gas exploration operations in the eastern Mediterranean.
If Libya makes such a request from us, in such a case, we can send our personnel there at the necessary level, especially after striking the military security agreement.
Protesters in Iraq have vowed to keep up pressure on the government until their demands are met. The protesters gathered once again in El Tahrir Square in Baghdad, despite efforts by security forces to stop the demonstrations in the past days. Hundreds of people have been killed since anti-government demonstrations began.
We will remain peaceful in this place and not move. The state has to find a solution. We will not leave and not cross the line that was put between us.
The Lebanese security forces have clashed with protesters in the northern city of Tripoli as they took protests to homes of politicians and targeted government buildings. The Lebanese army fired tear gas to disperse protesters as they marched to politicians' homes, dumping rubbish outside their doors. The angry protesters also attacked municipality headquarters in Tripoli, mashing windows and setting a room on fire. The protests, which started in October, were triggered by austerity measures put in place by the government, corruption and unemployment. And protests have erupted in India after the government approved the controversial new citizenship bill. Demonstrators in northeast India set tires on fire and blocked roads across the region to express their anger hours after lawmakers approved the government's new citizenship bill. The new legislation will fast-track citizenship claims from immigrants from 3 neighboring countries, but not if they are Muslim. Islamic groups see this move as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda to marginalize India's 200 million Muslims.
From this protest, we urge to the central government, don't impose such type of draconian bill, such type of unconstitutional bill in the soil of Assam and entire Northeast. And in near future, we will intensify our protest.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter,